1927. After 2 decades of false starts, aviation was finally spreading its wings. Charles Lindbergh, the dashing son of a U.S. congressman, captured the world's fickle imagination.
Away he goes.
Families crowded around the radio to listen to the breathless reports as the Spirit of St. Louis crossed the Atlantic Ocean.
Flight from New York to Paris.
A year later, Lindbergh was named Time magazine's first Man of the Year. Now a national hero, he was mobbed by fans during a whirlwind tour across the country. But one person in the crowd, a precocious teen named Florence Klingensmith, proved immune to Lindbergh's charm.
Florence waved to Charles, and he did not wave back. And she took offense to that. She wanted to show him and show everybody that a woman could fly too.
She'd later write she was a lone girl among 400 boys. Lindbergh's wave, or lack thereof, sparked something primal within Florence, something that would change the direction of aviation forever.
When I learned how to fly, I was the only female in my class. These ladies that paved the way, that broke that glass ceiling so that other women could become a part of aviation. Somewhere along history, we forgot about them. Their history is important, and we wouldn't be where we are without them.
From the very beginning, Florence Klingensmith was already doing a man's job.
She was born on a small farm north of Moorhead. Moorhead still has a small town feel.
A word that's been used to describe Florence is spectacle. That's a Norwegian word that means rambunctious and wild and kind of crazy and kind of a wild child. She rode motorcycles up and down the street of Moorhead, Minnesota. She did stunts off the ski jump.
But she'd never considered a career as a pilot. That is, until she was snubbed by Charles Lindbergh in North Dakota during that summer of 1928.
That's where she got her interest in aviation and decided that she was going to be a pilot to show him and show the others.
Brash and enthusiastic, Florence first took a job skydiving in exchange for flight lessons, then working as an assistant mechanic at the Fargo airport. She traveled door to door, hat in hand, soliciting donations for her first plane. It worked.
Someone met her with the response of, "If you risk your neck, I'll risk my money." And I can imagine she didn't hesitate one bit to accept that offer.
Florence christened the plane Miss Fargo, but aviation was still experiencing some severe growing pains.
It was financially difficult for people to become pilots. She begged for money. She was a stunt girl, jumping off of airplanes, walking on wings, whatever she could do to make money to learn how to fly. All her hard work paid off because she became the first female pilot in the state of North Dakota.
Pilots struggled to make a living. Barnstormers crisscrossed the country, performing for crowds of all sizes, literally sleeping in barns next to their planes and the livestock.
Air shows were the equivalent of what the Super Bowl is to us now. There were tens of thousands of people in the stands to watch these airplanes. Pilots competing, flying across the country.
She did have a business card, and it simply just said, "Florence Klingensmith, Fargo, North Dakota, Aviatrix." She probably would have worn that title with pride, showing that, yes, a woman can do this.
Skepticism and thinly veiled chauvinism followed the Aviatrix into the cockpit with each flight. But a determined Florence Klingensmith resolved to prove the naysayers wrong, first with her speed, then with her aerobatics. Her stunt of choice? The inside loop, also known as the dead man's loop. It's a delicate ballet between the plane and gravity. Audiences loved it. In April of 1930, Florence, now nicknamed Treetops by the media, shattered the world record with more than 140 loops in one day, a record immediately nullified by a lack of witnesses. 2 months later, she would try again.
She spent 4.5 hours in the cockpit, continuously flying loops, with an audience of 50,000 people watching. The previous record was just over 100, and that day, Florence flew over 1,000 inside loops.
Groggy and choked from gas fumes, Florence Klingensmith now held a world record. No man could deny her abilities or her spectacle. 2 years later, Florence would win the coveted Amelia Earhart Trophy, presented by Earhart herself, and became an original member of the 99s, the first coalition of female pilots.
Florence Klingensmith makes the news again, winning more races near Cleveland, Ohio. Life has been one adventure after another for treetops, through steady perseverance.
But in the fall of 1933, during the international air races in Chicago, her career would be cut short by tragedy.
Here they come. Chicago welcomes flyers from across the country for the 100-mile Frank Phillips Trophy race.
Florence died just shy of her 30th birthday in one of those speed races.
Her plane had been fitted with an engine that was too large for it. That caused some mechanical failure that ultimately resulted in her nosediving into the ground at a great speed.
Her tiny aircraft had been retrofitted with a new engine, one that was 3 times more powerful than the stock engine. Later, investigators discovered that Florence tried to bail out of the plane. Her parachute was found tangled in the fuselage. The normally hushed whispers of sexism grew louder, with organizers seizing on Florence's death to bar women from future air races.
Her gender was immediately looked at for a cause. It didn't matter that there were 80,000 people in that audience that watched the plane fall apart.
North Dakota's Aviatrix spiraled out of control just seconds before impact. Through the first 8 laps, Klingensmith.
During their investigation, they found that Florence indeed was on her period at the time. As soon as the media found out about that, they ran with that. Back in those days when pilots died, they were celebrated. They were heroes. But Florence was shipped back to Moorhead, Minnesota in a box, on a train, covered in newspaper.
Florence Klingensmith was buried in Oak Mound Cemetery just outside of Moorhead. The fallen hero had returned home. An investigation into her death ultimately revealed the cause of the crash: mechanical failure. Her career lasted just 6 short years.
She just didn't get that same respect and celebration that male pilots were receiving at the time.
Pioneer of the skies, Charles Lindbergh, has died.
Unlike Florence, Charles Lindbergh would fly for another 40 years. Then President Ford would tell reporters, Lindbergh represented all that was best in our country.
When Florence was flying, there were 29 million women registered to vote. There were less than 12 that were pilots.
Today, aviation continues to be dominated by men. Only 6% of pilots in the United States are female.
Society told her that she should be at home and she should have babies and she should take care of her house. I decided that I was going to make it a mission to have our airport name changed in her honor.
The Moorhead Municipal Airport now has been rechristened Florence Klingensmith Field. Florence was also honored at the Air Race Classic by the University of North Dakota in 2023.
It's a good reminder that you don't have to be born in a big place to do great things.
Near her home in Moorhead, Minnesota, a mural stands watch, honoring Florence's achievements and cementing her legacy as a pioneer.
She was forgotten for so long, but she's coming back to life and people know who she is again.
Now, the story of the Aviatrix endures, inspiring a new generation of women to fight for their seats in the cockpit.